So we were getting to the end of the Reiki session, and I was preparing to share the closing ritual that I had been taught for bringing a session to a close. The dim light in the room made it feel very peaceful and calm, and I was surrounded by about a half dozen other pairs of Reiki practitioners sharing sessions with each other at our monthly Reiki practitioner circle for students of my first teacher. The woman that I was working on, Claire, was an acquaintance who I knew just briefly from these sorts of events. And I didn't know what specifically she was struggling with this day, but it was clear from her manner that she was distressed and probably looking for some soothing from this Reiki session. It had gone pretty well up until that point, and so I decided as I prepared to close the session to just try a simple technique that our teacher had shared recently, just a sweet little something extra to add to the closing ritual as a way of topping us off. And so I prepared to just use 2 fingers to make a simple little spiral at the high chest while sharing some Reiki right there before sweeping the hands down the arms and legs as I always do. At least that's how it was supposed to go. But the moment that I put pressure on Claire's chest, which I realized too late, was also the base of her throat. She bolted straight up, letting out a loud cry and gripping her throat, staring at me wildly as if I had attacked her. That was a challenging moment. Friends, welcome back to Heartscapes, where we discuss and explore Reiki and life at the intersection of self-reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. I'm grateful to have you here. I want to take some time in today's video to agitate a phrase that I commonly hear inside of our Reiki practitioner communities that says that Reiki can cause no harm. It's a phrase that I've used myself when communicating the ways in which Reiki can be a really beautiful complementary medicine. But I've also heard it being used in response to folks who bring up experiences of distress or experiences that were in some way frightening or disquieting that happened during a Reiki session or class. And in those cases, this phrase, well, Reiki can cause no harm, while probably, shared with the intention of providing reassurance, in cases like this, it can actually serve to dismiss the concerns that the person is bringing up and disregard that person as the expert of their own experience. And in this way, we actually are, in fact, causing harm, whether or not we mean to. When I have opened up conversations with folks who have used this phrase in this way, I found it often to be true that this potential harm is really stemming from a certain misunderstanding with how we use the language around Reiki. And it's a misunderstanding that can be easily corrected and adjusted for with paying a little bit closer attention to the language that we use and understanding a little bit more about the impacts of using language in particular ways. So let's take a look at that. So if we look at the phrase, Reiki can cause no harm, if we look at it from a particular perspective, it's true. Reiki, translated from Japanese as spiritual energy, refers to the energy that animates and connects us, that brings life to the universe and connects all life. It is what we're made of. It simply is what we are. You are Reiki, and you always have been. So, as a phenomenon in the world, Reiki indeed can cause no harm. However, we also commonly use the word Reiki to refer not just to spiritual energy, but to refer to a system of practice developed in the late 1800s in Japan by Mikao Usui, drawn from long-standing Japanese spiritual traditions, which then was taught over time to many people in Japan and eventually made its way to the West, changing and transitioning into a wide range of different types of practices that are now practiced and taught and experienced by millions of people all over the world. And if we're using the word Reiki to refer to a system of practice created and enacted by people with other people, then certainly, just like any other system of practice or human endeavor that is enacted by people on people, there is potential for harm to be caused, unintentional or otherwise. And this is where we want to be really careful with how we're using our language and how we're paying attention to what it is that the person is actually asking about, right? So in this case, I'm talking about situations where people are reporting an experience that they had inside of a Reiki session that made them uncomfortable. That could have been because of an internal experience that they had with, turning their attention inward to their physical and emotional being. It could be a disquieting experience they had with the behavior of somebody else that was in the space with them, whether the practitioner or another student. And it could be something that's just, really about where they're at in their life and whether or not they're really in a place where doing this sort of spiritual work is what's meant for them. And so we want to pay attention to what is the context that people are sharing and asking this question from. Thinking back to my experiences with Claire, I walked away from that experience feeling very ashamed and very confused about what had actually happened. That experience stayed with me for quite some time. And looking back on it now with, the distance of time and a great deal more experience, I can see that sharing, what seemed to me to be a simple practice, a simple, sweet technique, but sharing that without notice, without explanation, and in a way that was on a sensitive part of the body with somebody who was clearly in distress was a big mistake on my part. It was something that she perceived as a violation, as harm that was caused to her in a space where she expected to be safe. And over the years, that's become a point of reflection for me. How can we as Reiki practitioners create a container of safety, of trust, where people experience choice, are allowed to give consent for what happens, so that they can feel a sense of control over their experience inside of that space? In other words, how to cultivate a trauma-informed perspective on the work that we provide. There's a great deal of wonderful work being done in this area in the realms of trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed meditation, and other practices. But there isn't something like that specifically for us, for Reiki practitioners. And so it's something that I've been developing over some time. So going back to the notion of agitating this concept that Reiki can cause no harm, let's look at a few other examples of how we as humans enacting the system of Reiki can in fact cause harm. If, for example, we haven't done our own personal work on the parts of ourselves that might still be hurt or afraid, then those parts might feel like they need to be in control of a situation, in control of other people around us in a way that actually takes agency and control away from our clients. That might show up in trying to overdiagnose them or be very directive in what they should do, rather than letting them make decisions about where they want to go and how they want to proceed. If we haven't done the work and put in the time to learn about the cultural and historical origins of the practices that we engage in, like Reiki, then we can cause harm through cultural appropriation, through representing these practices as things that they are not and disregarding what they actually are in context. If we are just unaccustomed to thinking about things through a trauma-informed lens, then we might not be aware that providing consent to touch is a really important part of helping somebody to feel in control of their experience. And we might therefore not ask for that consent when our clients come to us for a session. We might not pay attention or be educated about the way in which a person wants to be referred to in terms of their gender pronouns. And we might therefore cause harm to them by misgendering them, by demonstrating that we don't really respect who they are or understand or pay attention. And if we, if we're in a place where We find it really uncomfortable to be around other people's intense feelings or expressions of their needs. And then we might use a phrase like Reiki can cause no harm to shut down somebody when they've reported something intense that's happening for them. The phrase spiritual bypassing is often used to describe situations like this and is particularly harmful if a person is reporting a harm that they've experienced inside of a space like a Reiki class or Reiki session, such as racist microaggressions. And then a phrase like, well, Reiki can cause no harm is used to kind of shut down that complaint and divert the attention away from what that person is experiencing and reporting. So all of these are examples of ways that we can indeed cause harm through normal human interaction. But the really good news, and the thing that really animates me and lights me up and just has me really excited for the work that I've been doing, is that there are ways to avoid, to minimize this kind of harm, to, if not eliminate the possibility altogether. I don't actually believe that we can ever truly guarantee a completely safe space for another person, because we just don't know the full range of what a person might experience as harm. But there is a lot we can do to minimize the possibility of causing harm in the spaces that we hold. And this is very exciting to me. I hope it is to you too. So for example, we can begin with our own practice. We can be sure that we're really tending to ourselves and to our own healing process in a way that allows us to remain unattached to other people's experiences and unattached to the need to control the experiences that they're having. We can educate ourselves, take the time to learn about the origins of the practices that we engage in and communicate about those origins clearly with our clients and in our communities. We can make sure that we're always paying attention and asking about the gender pronouns that our clients want to use, and therefore demonstrating respect for who they are. And we can ensure that we are relating to Reiki and relating to our own process well enough so that we can make more room for people's big feelings, for the things that they need to communicate and express. We can make sure that we are resilient enough that if somebody reports a negative experience that they're having, perhaps in our space, that we're resilient enough to receive that and to respond appropriately, and therefore avoid spiritually bypassing people or letting that happen in our space among other people. These are really important steps we can take. They take time, they take commitment, and in some ways they're very simple. It really often comes down to what we're paying attention to, what practices and protocols we're incorporating into our work, and how well we're tending to our own container, which of course is something that we should be doing anyway. That's hopefully why we got into this work to begin with. And we can remember that there is a big difference between Reiki as a phenomenon out in the world and Reiki as a system of practice enacted by people for and with other people, with all of our complexity and our flaws. It's become an important part of my mission here at Heartscapes to create a space where we can really dig into these things, where we can support each other in creating a trauma-informed lens through which we do our practices, where we can learn about the history and the cultural context of this work to avoid cultural appropriation, and where we can learn about spiritual bypassing and what it means for that to happen so we can avoid allowing it to happen inside of our spaces. In these ways, we can broaden what is possible in terms of healing for ourselves, for other individuals, for our communities, and for the world. And now, I would really love to hear from you. What's come up for you as you've heard me talk about these things? What stories come to your memory? What experiences have you had? What questions do you have? What challenges? I'd really love to hear what this has meant to you and what comes up for you. And I'd love for you to drop a comment on that down below so we can have a conversation about it. If this is something that you want to pursue a little bit more deeply, I would really invite you to learn about our work on cultivating trauma-informed Reiki practices. And I'll drop links down below for information on that, as well as a free self-assessment that we provide to help get people started. And if you have enjoyed hearing about this, learning about these perspectives, and would like to hear more, I'd love to have you subscribe to this channel and follow us along on this journey. It really helps us out here at Heartscape's YouTube channel for you to share these videos with other people who might benefit from them, and to share them on your social media platforms. And so thank you so much for being on this journey, these few steps with me today. And as you continue to deepen this work in and for yourself and your community, may you be deeply provisioned for that journey. Thank you so much. I love you. I'll catch you next time.